Welcome to the Peaceful World Schooling Podcast, featuring your host, Angela Harders. We are committed to cultivating a peaceful world beginning right in our own hearts and homes. Together, we believe that the world is our biggest and best classroom, and the people and places in it are our greatest teachers. So I invite you to join me on the adventure of a lifetime, beginning with a conversation that can change the world. Today's episode of the Peaceful World Schooling Podcast is brought to you by the De-Schooling Diary, a 365-day journey into living and learning without school. You can order your copy today on Amazon. Hello and welcome to today's episode of the Peaceful World Schooling Podcast. I am so excited to be able to share the guest that I have with you today. Her name is Dalia Monterroso, but you might know her as the President of Chickenlandia. Dalia, thank you so much for being a guest on my podcast today.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm super happy to be here. And you pronounce my name so beautifully. That's odd. That's not typical.
Well, I tell people I am the gringa con un corazón chapín. So I love Guatemala. I have been a huge fan of Guatemala for a long time, and I taught myself Spanish many moons ago. But yes, so I love to be able to speak and interact with Spanish speakers, and any chance I can practice my Spanish, I'm happy to do so.
Well, your Spanish is much better than mine. I can tell you that right off the bat. My Spanish is not good. Muy mal. Muy.
No worries. But even if Spanish is not your forte, you do have a really interesting forte that has been an inspiration to thousands of people. And for those of you that are not familiar with Dalia, I said she is the President of Chickenlandia. Dalia, what is Chickenlandia?
Well, first and foremost, it's my chicken yard. But I like to think of it as like a place where everybody belongs. I think I grew up as a child of immigrants in a city where it was like a small town, really, and in Texas. It was a suburb, and I think we were probably one of maybe 3 Hispanic families in the entire town. And it was, people were really nice and everything. It was a great place to grow up. But I kind of felt like I didn't belong. I didn't really belong in the community that my family was in, because I was removed from it. I was born in the United States. I didn't understand Spanish, and then I also didn't completely belong in the community that I grew up in, because I identified as a a Mexican. They called me a Mexican kid, because they didn't know, they didn't know that there are other countries down there
besides Mexico.
Yes. But like I said, great people, lovely people. So, yeah, I was kind of alienated, and I don't think that my feeling of alienation is anything that is like unique to me. I think we all kind of have those stories in our lives. So when I created Chickenlandia, it was like, okay, I'm going to call this Welcome to Chickenlandia, because I want everyone to feel welcome here. I want it to be a place where we come together. And it was kind of like the place that I made where I really felt like I belonged there. So yeah, that's one of the stories. There's many stories. There's like how it got its name and all this stuff. But that's really like the heart of it, of what it is.
I love that. And you definitely do have such a welcoming presence about you. I think that's one of the things that has inspired me most about your videos is you are literally smiling and full of so much joy in every single video. Like I cannot watch your videos without having a huge smile on my face too, because You truly do. You embody someone who is passionate about chickens. And it doesn't matter if you have chickens or don't have chickens. When you watch Dalia's videos, you are going to feel her passion and be inspired by her passion and her joy that she has for chickens. And actually, Dalia, we talked about this before we started recording, but for those of you that are listening, Dalia is actually the reason why my family and I started having and raising backyard chickens in my suburban backyard here in Maryland. I did not think that this would be possible, but thanks to Dalia's videos on YouTube and just all the other content that she has put out on social media, she has truly given me the inspiration to know that even though I'm a single mom, even though I live in the suburbs, I absolutely can raise chickens in my backyard. And I would love to learn more about your story. Did you grow up raising chickens, or how did this passion unfold for you?
I did not grow up with chickens. I mean, I was born in 1974. So I grew up, eating cereal. Yeah. I will say, my mom was an amazing cook. She cooked all this wonderful Guatemalan food, and I kind of rejected it at the time. Now I don't reject it. I do not reject it now. But back then I was like, oh, I want what my friends have. They have like mashed potatoes that came out of a box, and they're eating casserole with gosh, what is that? It's like a green bean casserole, and it's
Oh,
got or like the tuna one that has like the Campbell's cream of mushroom soup in it, and it's so
yes.
good. It's
Your mom was
so
probably like, "What the heck is this?"
I know, like, who thought of this?
Right.
Whoever it was, obviously a genius, um, but yeah, I grew up like a lot of people have grown up very separated from my food, and consequently separated from my culture because,
Mm,
if you're separated from your food, you're automatically separated from your culture. That's just they kind of go together.
mm,
So yeah, did not grow up with chickens. My parents, they were like I had mentioned before, they were immigrants. They just worked all the time, and they didn't really even have time to have a garden.
mm,
So, whereas when they lived in Guatemala, especially on my mom's side, they grew up with chickens and growing food and stuff like that. Once they got here, it was really about just survival in the 70s and 80s. It was, all about just getting through the day, and that's what my experience was. And I also think that experience is not very unique. I think a lot of us have that experience.
mhm,
So that's why it's so passionate to me. Like, I think a lot of people are like, well, I just don't have any experiences like that. Like, I can't even really imagine. Sorry, my dogs are barking. I don't know if you can hear them. I can't even imagine like what it would be like having
Dahlia?
having chickens in the environment that I'm in, like if they're in the city or the suburbs. But I guarantee you it is possible. Did I freeze?
Oh, yes, you did for a
Okay.
minute. Okay,
And my
sorry.
dogs started barking.
No worries. Could you repeat like the last couple minutes?
Where did I end? Well, I
You
mean,
were
I
telling
think
me that you were like disconnected from your food and that you don't think that that's something that's unique to just you.
yeah, I think a lot of us, we grew up, I didn't even really hold a baby chick until I was in my early 20s. And, for many of us that are in now living in the cities or the suburbs, they can't even really imagine, like, well, how would I have chickens here? Like, that just, surely that's not possible, but I guarantee you it is. And I feel like not only will it bring fresh eggs to your family and everything, but it also, certainly for me, connected me with the land that I'm walking on and also my culture. So
Mm,
I think yeah, I am super passionate about it. Super passionate.
that's amazing. So what was it that actually like inspired you to start taking care of chickens? I know you didn't hold a baby chicken until your 20s. How did you go from 20-year-old holding a baby chick for the first time to now being the president of Chickenlandia?
Well, I'm going to tell you a very quick story. about the first time I held a baby chick. I was in actually I'd held now that I think about it, it was 3 times before, or maybe not. Maybe not. Anyway, the first time I ever kind of was close, even like close to chickens. I have no like memory of being, maybe I saw chickens around in someone's house or something like that, but um to be very close to them, I went to this one of my relatives' house in Guatemala. And like I don't understand Spanish very well. I understand some of it, but I don't speak it very well. I've been to Guatemala many times, and this time I was there for about a month. I was with my sister, and we were traveling around with my cousins, and half the time I had no idea what we were doing, like because of the language barrier. So we go to this village, don't know where we are. We go to this person's house. I know it's one of my relatives. No idea who she is, what side she's on. I think she was on my mom's side, did not know. We walked into the kitchen. It was a very small, this is Guatemala, very small house. It's basically like one room. And we're in like the kitchen area, and there's a box. And this woman whose house I'm at, she's like, oh, like baby talking to something in the box. And I'm like, what is going on? And she picks up a little bantam hen out of
Oh,
this box. And she says, mira, mira, look, look. And the little bantam hen has baby chicks in the box, and it's in her kitchen. And she's kissing this chicken and talking to it in baby talk and Spanish and everything. And I thought to myself, what a crazy chicken lady, I just thought it was the craziest thing. Of course, fast forward, many, many years. I had gone to Hollywood to become the next great American filmmaker. Wasn't really working out. I worked as a personal assistant for a little while. I worked at Lifetime Television. I was just really trying to be a writer and get into the creative side of television and film,
mm,
and just playing that game. And then I met the man who would become my husband, and we got married, and we wanted to start a family. And I was like, I just don't want to do this in Los Angeles.
mm,
So that was tough because it had been my dream, to go there and be in the industry. And but you get older, you start to understand reality, and you make different priorities. And so I really felt like I was good with that. Like I was like, let's go. We moved up here to the Pacific Northwest. We're in Bellingham, Washington now. Um, I had my first baby. He was about 18 months old. He was adorable. I loved being a mother. I loved being a wife, had a great family, but I was really suffering from postpartum depression. And I didn't know that that's what was happening, because moms will literally run themselves into the ground if the kids are fed and they're okay. That will be all they're paying attention to. And I just didn't understand what was happening to me.
mhm,
Um, on top of that, I was mourning the loss of my dream,
mm,
and really the loss of like this identity that I had and this dream that I had for my life. So I was really going through a tough time, even though my life was beautiful. I was struggling a lot. And naturally, I decided I was going to get some chickens like this. I just said, I just need something else, something else to do. I need a hobby. And I had no idea how they would affect my life. When I first got them, what I like to say is, the moment I was taking them out of the little bag, they came in a little bag, a little paper sack. I got them from the farm store, and putting them into the brooder. And in that moment, my heart opened and a new dream came in.
mm,
And so I feel eternally grateful, not just to chickens, but also to the people that have really encouraged me along the way to become an educator. That was one thing I didn't, I actually really resisted doing that, certainly on a national or international scale. I was happy to teach locally, but I didn't want to become like the YouTuber that was teaching people about chickens. I just wanted to do like entertainment style stuff. And if you look at like my old YouTube videos, oh gosh, they're so cringy. But but they are like all kind of entertainment stuff. They're not really like educational.
Mm,
But I just kept having people wanting to learn from me. And when I settled into that, that really kind of sealed the deal for me.
mm,
Um, and now I'm the president of Chickenlandia. It all just kind of came together, and I am still kind of doing entertainment stuff because I make YouTube videos. I'm still a performer. I'm still writing. I wrote a book. So it's just interesting how dreams kind of come at you like that when like you least expect it, or when you think that
yeah.
they're gone, a new dream will come in.
Yeah. I think your story is so profound, and I want to thank you for sharing just so openly and honestly and vulnerably about your experience. I think postpartum depression and anxiety is something that we definitely don't talk about very often as mom, because just like you said, we just kind of sacrifice ourselves to care for everyone else around us, and we're a lot of times we're not even aware of the fact that we desperately need care and help and assistance
Yes.
with our own mental and emotional and physical health. And so thank you for just sharing about that. That was something that I struggled with as well. And I can so relate to your feeling of setting aside one of your dreams to be able to kind of create and embrace a new life that looked different than what you would
Yes.
have thought that it would have looked like. And what a beautiful thing that in letting go of one dream, you discovered this new dream and created this new life that you love. And not only a life that you love, but you're giving other people like me the opportunity to do the same thing, to discover this new dream. And yes, chickens are a part of it, but I agree with you 1,000%. It is absolutely about like the community that you're building and that's coming alongside you and supporting you as you're pursuing your passions in life as a mom, as an educator. I am curious though, as a former public school teacher, why you were hesitant to identify yourself as an educator. What was it about calling yourself as an educator that just felt like, that's not my thing?
Well, okay. So coming from an immigrant family, I know a lot of people out there will relate to what I'm about to say, but there was a lot of pressure in my family to get a high level of education, certainly just to go to college, get that university degree. In Guatemala, people don't have a lot of money, so really the currency is education,
Mhm.
and there is so much importance put on that especially when you come into the US. It's just like, oh man, there's a lot of pressure, and I was always different. And I think this is why I kind of gravitate towards homeschooling families or alternative schooling families, because I got really, really lost in the education system, and it really didn't do justice for me as a person that learned differently. And I was creative and everything, but I couldn't learn the way that I was being taught. And because I came from a family of high achievers, or what I perceived as, high achievers, good grades, they all got their university degrees. Um, I was really ashamed of how different I was, and I hid it a lot. Not a lot. I just hid it. Like I actually was like perpetrating a fraud. Like my whole from like junior high all the way until senior, I just pretended like I was doing well in school, and I was not. Um and I did go to the university, but I didn't graduate. I went for philosophy. I'm still a philosopher, by the way.
You
But
are, yeah.
I I didn't graduate. And my dad would always just like bless him, rest in peace, daddy, I love him. Um, but he had a really hard time just letting go that I didn't get my degree.
Mm,
And it the consequence of that was me also having a hard time letting that go. So when people would come to me and they would want me to teach them, I would have a lot of imposter syndrome.
mm,
And I still struggle with that today. Even at when my book got published and everything. I mean, there's a line in my book where I'm really honest and I say, I almost didn't do this because I felt like, what do I know? Like what do I know? I'm just somebody that loves chickens. I've learned a lot about chickens. I've gathered a lot of information about them. But what authority do I have to be doing this? But one of the things that I, I'm I really want people to understand is that this kind of knowledge, this knowledge of chicken keeping, it's actually ancient knowledge. It's traditional knowledge. And we are all entitled to that. We don't need to rely on someone behind, people behind closed doors, people from up on a hill teaching us about these things that are really, traditional wisdom of like pretty much everyone's culture.
mhm.
And
Yeah.
so when I was able to really understand that and feel it, not just like understand it mentally, but feel it in my bones, that was really the moment when I was like, you know what, I can do this. I can share this knowledge. In fact, I have a duty to share this knowledge.
Mhm.
Um, and I encourage everybody to share it. And I like to say I love the fact that I'm an educator. I love Chickenlandia. This is my livelihood. It's how I make money. It's my career. But ultimately, I've succeeded when someone doesn't need me anymore. When they're like, you know what, I have this in me. I feel this
Yeah.
uh this ancient practice within me and I know what I'm doing, and that makes me feel really good.
Yeah, I can relate to that too. I feel the same way because one of the things that I'm passionate about, which I definitely see this shift in education. I think before there was a lot of pressure in society that you have to have a bachelor's degree, you have to have this, a diploma or a title or letters after your name to be considered an expert in something. And I really don't believe that that's the case anymore. I think that more people are starting to wake up and realize that you don't have to have these things in order to be considered an expert in a field or to have success in your life. And it might look different for different people. But I truly believe that's something you really have embodied that being an expert, pun intended, egg spurt, pun
Yes.
intended. I would absolutely consider you an egg spurt in chickens, and you're right. A sign of a good teacher, of a great teacher, is the fact that our students will one day not need us anymore. And that really is the heart behind homeschooling too, that we want to be able to educate our children to be lifelong, self-sufficient, independent learners. And we want them to not have to rely on us and depend on us for everything that they need to know or be able to do
Yeah.
one day, but to truly discover for themselves, what is it that I am most passionate about? What is the difference that I want to make in the world? How do I define success? Because it's going to be different for every child, for every parent. That success and knowledge and expertise is going to be really different for each of us.
Yeah, and it's so interesting the parallel because I've done a lot of homeschooling podcasts, and the parallels between homeschooling and chicken keeping are really interesting to me because just like human beings have been keeping chickens for thousands of years, parents have been teaching their children for thousands of years. So we will get into this thing where we're like researching and we're feeling insecure and we get confused and we don't know what to do. And in those moments, what I'll tell people regarding chickens is to, kind of turn inward, listen to your heart. What is your intuition telling you is the right thing to do in this situation? And I think with homeschooling, that is also a very valuable practice because, school, like modern schooling, is is modern. It's not been around for that long, considering how long human beings have existed and how long we've been teaching our children. So, yeah, I just thought that was very interesting and something that I didn't really consider until after I started doing the podcast circuit for all the homeschooling families.
Yeah. So you do your YouTube channel. You also have been a guest on many podcasts. I saw that you did a TED Talk, and then you mentioned also that you recently released a book. And I am so excited about this book. I have not had a chance to get it yet, but it is next on my on my Amazon list. Can you share with us a little bit more about this book that you recently released and published?
Yes, it's called Let's All Keep Chickens, the Down to Earth Guide to Natural Practices for Healthier Birds and a Happier World. And it's called Let's All Keep Chickens because I really tried to just stress the fact that chicken keeping really belongs to everybody. Like, we should all have the opportunity to do it. It
Yeah.
is possible to do it. If, really the main thing that becomes a roadblock for people are the laws where they live. Like, at least in the Western world, that's the main roadblock that people hit. And then of course there's people that live in apartment buildings. But even them, like, I think that they should be able to have community chickens. And we should have more of a focus of bringing chickens into the cities, into the suburbs, all of that. So basically, it's a book that you can get, like, if you've never had chickens before. It is really going to help you do go through the whole process. Like, it's a very comprehensive beginner chicken keeping book. If you're an intermediate chicken keeper and you're looking to kind of strengthen your practices or maybe lean a little bit more natural than what you have done before, I think it's a great book, because I do definitely lean natural, which is, usually cheaper in the long run.
Yeah.
um so yeah, I think I just try and focus on, like I said, the fact that human beings have domesticated chickens millennia ago, that this relationship is ancient, that it has traditionally been very sustainable. I try to keep it that way rather than having people using a lot of resources in order to do this, because we are kind of shifting that way. Certainly in the United States, because we have so much influence from factory farming. A lot of the information, a lot of the science, and a lot of the philosophy that comes that about chicken keeping comes through that lens. And so
Mhm.
I'm trying to kind of break through that and have us remember, okay, wait a minute, like, this really shouldn't cost you a lot of money.
Mhm.
If you go to the literally the poorest places on earth, you will find very poor people and you will find their chickens.
Yeah.
So, that is something that we can remember, that we can keep as a foundation in this
Mhm.
journey. And also to just relax and have fun and, not stress out.
Yeah.
Some of the information out there is like, oh my gosh, I'm getting stressed just reading this. Like,
Yeah. I
yeah, gets wild.
It does, yeah, and it, of course, as in any field, you're gonna have tons of different opinions and tons of different methods and tools and strategies, and I mean, coops that are thousands of dollars, and I saw an advertisement the other day for like a smart coop with like video cameras installed on
I
the.
know, and they contacted me. They contacted me, and I had meant, like, I put a star, like, I just have so many people emailing me and a lot of companies emailing me, and they contacted me, and I forgot. I just, the email fell into the abyss like all the other emails.
Yeah.
Um, and that kind of stuff is really cool. Like, it's cool. Like, I want to be able to look in the camera and see my chicken laying an egg. But I have a very expensive coop. I do, You don't need that.
Mhm.
You do not need that.
Funny story, one of my best friends is actually from Guatemala, and she
Oh.
came to visit us about a year ago. She came to visit us about a year ago and with her kids, and so we were showing them our backyard and our fancy chicken coop, and The little run that we have an omelet igloo, which if you're interested in an igloo, I'll share with you the link for it. I really like the coop that we have.
I love I love my omelet. Yeah, I have they gave me one. They
Oh,
freaking gave me one.
oh my gosh, that's awesome. Yeah,
Anyway.
I really love mine a lot. And so that was the coop that we got to start. And my friend came outside and she was like, I think it's so weird that you have a house for your chickens. Like you bought a house for your chickens. And I looked at her and I was like, what do you mean? Like where do you put your chickens, you know? And she was like, Angela, they're just there. Like, she
In the
lives in
tree.
rural Guatemala. She's like, they just find a tree and
Yeah.
that's just where they go. And I remember looking at her and I was like, "You're not terrified that they're gonna be, like, swallowed by predators? You don't have them in, like, this super fenced in area where they're, like, protected all the." She was like, "Nope." She was like, "Sometimes you might get, like, a hawk that will snatch one, but there's, like." She was like, "It's part of the, cycle of life,"
Yeah.
and she's like, "But most of the time, they've got roosters that protect them, and so they're
And
just
they
out
have dogs.
doing their
Yeah.
thing." Oh, yes, yeah, they also have dogs that will kind of, like, protect them and yeah, and I was so surprised. I was like, "You really just they're just there." And then I remembered, I was like, "Oh, yeah, I've been to Guatemala many times," and they do. They just kinda have them. They're just out and around, and no one's, like, stressed or freaking out of like, "Oh my gosh, they're gonna die," or I have to, like, I don't know, create all these fancy contraptions and expensive doohickeys to, like, prevent raccoons or I don't know. But
Yeah, and
yeah.
I get it. I hate to my chickens are my pets. That's certainly not the only demographic I'm speaking to. I completely support anyone keeping chickens that aren't in a factory farm.
Mhm.
And in my book, I start out talking about my great grandmother and her chickens lived in a tree. I mean, this was
So amazing to
before there were mills that made chicken feed, at least not in Guatemala. And so it's not that I think, well, your chickens should live in a tree and you shouldn't care if they get eaten by predators and that's not where I'm coming from at all. But I want us to remember, that traditionally how this has been done. And of course, many of us live in environments where if we had our chickens out in the elements all the time, like they wouldn't survive because the kinds not only the breeds that we have in this country are different,
yeah.
but also, there's a big difference between Guatemala and Minnesota, weather-wise.
For sure.
Yes, but I just want people to remember how resilient these animals are and how they've been through, by our side through all kinds of adversity,
Yeah,
war, famine, natural disaster, all these things. They have survived those, not just survived with us, but they've helped us to survive through them.
yeah, yeah,
And
absolutely.
so, yeah,
And
I just,
we
I,
actually free range now. Our chickens we have a flock of 8 and they free range like all the time. And they have access to their coop and their run and things like that. And if we like go away, we'll put them away. But they're happy. They're happy being
yeah,
able to free range and they eat bugs and all the things that are out there. And we give them all of our, organic strawberries and all the other
there
food
you
that
go.
we have, for them. And like it's such a symbiotic relationship where there's like
Yes.
we're eliminating waste and yet we're providing food for them and they're providing food for us. And it's such a blessing. Like we love them. I mean, they're like our pets too, but I never would have imagined in a million years that I would ever have chickens. Like my philosophy as a single mom was like, I don't need an extra expense in my life.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to have a dog. I didn't want to have, any of that stuff. I was like, it's just gonna be, too much money or whatever. And then when COVID happened, we were like, maybe we'll do chickens. And I was not anticipating how much I would love being able to do this. And it is not nearly as hard. I mean, I know that there are things that are difficult, but that's one of the biggest things I think I've learned from you, Dalia, is that it's not as hard as I was thinking that it would be. It really is like so natural and intuitive. And you're right, like going back to like our history and our roots, like families just had chickens and it was just such a
Yes.
part of of life. Like every family had their own little group, and that was what they had for food, you know?
Yes. And I think about the people before us, it's not like it's so funny because, now we have all these methods of farming and stuff and these methods of animal husbandry. And a lot of that is taken from indigenous ways of doing things and kind of modernized and then renamed and put into our, uh, our internet so that we can learn about it, which is all great. I love that. But I will only ever call like what I'm doing chicken keeping
Mhm.
because I, I'm not going to put like a label on it or anything like that because when my ancestors did it, they weren't saying, oh, I'm doing the Chickenlandia way of chicken keeping. And it's just, it wasn't, it was their life. It wasn't part of their life. It was like just their life. It
Mhm.
was it was the way of doing things. It wasn't that they had adopted a way, it just was the way. And
Yeah.
so yeah, I just want us to remember that, like how much this is already ingrained in us and all of us. It's certainly not unique to any culture. Um Pretty much all of us have this in our history.
Mhm.
So I also
Absolutely.
like to think of it as a way that we can kind of come together and unite as people in during a time when we're really divided and everything. It's certainly uh in my list of wishes for people to become more united and less divided. So
And I
why not through
appreciate you
chickens?
making I agree, I agree. I tell everyone, like, if you have the ability to have chickens, just start. Like, you don't have to have all the answers figured out. There are so many incredible resources, and literally, I think, Dahlia, you have a video about just about every possible anomaly within chicken world that you could possibly have. I mean, all the crazy things or diseases and all the other stuff that might happen with a chicken. Dahlia's got a video on it that can help you. But just start. You don't have to have all of it figured out um, to be able to start. And then the nice thing too is, like, when you start, you learn what you need along the way. I mean, Dahlia, I know that when you started with your chickens, you didn't have it all figured out either, right?
No, I didn't. I mean, I learned some difficult lessons. And I think that fortunately, a lot of those lessons now I can teach about them so that other people don't have to have that experience.
Mhm.
But it is part of the experience that you will learn lessons. And sometimes those lessons are hard.
Yeah.
And that's okay. You know, that's how we learn. Um, your chickens aren't going to hate you, uh, it's part of the natural experience. Um, So yeah, it just goes back to the whole thing of like, listen to your heart, listen to your intuition. What you feel is right is probably the right thing to do. Try not to overcomplicate things. Find somebody, a teacher or a book or something. Doesn't have to be mine, but find one that you like, that you resonate with, and stick with it because there's a lot of conflicting information out there. And most of it is like, it really depends on the situation as to whether or not it's something you should do or not.
Yeah.
So remember that your particular situation is unique
Hmm.
and always choose what feels right for you, no matter what anyone else is saying.
Well, just like you mentioned too, keeping chickens in Minnesota is going to be very different than keeping chickens in Texas. It's going to look different because you live in a different space. So
It,
yes,
it,
finding what works for you is so important.
Yeah, it does. And there's a lot of like black and white information out there. Like you should never do this and you should never do that. And the roost has to be this way. And and it's like that is not, there's not a whole lot of absolutes when it comes to chicken keeping. Like you said, there's a big difference between raising chickens in Key West and then somewhere up in Calgary. Yeah. Like it's gonna be a different experience. And we always have to kind of keep that in mind. Also, raising chickens on a big plot of land is very different than raising them, in your backyard. And that's
Right.
something else that we have to keep in mind. So
Mhm.
so yeah. No, not a lot of absolutes in Chickenlandia, at least.
Yeah. One of the things that you talked about is yes, there are lots of lessons that we learn from chickens, but the hard ones. And there are some really, really hard lessons that we have to learn anytime that we're interacting with animals, especially animals that, for us at least, like they're like our pets. And actually, we had a very hard lesson that we had to learn. My daughter started a dog business when she was 7 years old, and her very first clients were two Weimaraners, and the Weimaraners were outside going, doing their thing, going to the bathroom in our fenced in backyard. And my 3-year-old son went outside and opened up the chicken coop when the dogs were outside. And I heard my daughter just screaming, and her chicken was like in the mouth of this dog. It was devastating. I mean, she cried,
Yeah.
I cried. It was terrible,
Yeah.
and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this girl she's never gonna want chickens or a dog ever again," it was so sad, but you're right, like, we had to learn about, part of raising life and fostering life and caring for life is also dealing with that aspect of death as well, and
Yes.
that was really hard as a child, to help my daughter process, like, the loss of her chicken that she had, I mean, literally raised him from we hatched them in our house, and so, they hatched in an incubator in our house, and that was really hard for her, and I'm just wondering, how has that been? Because I know you have children as well. How have they handled learning some of these hard lessons as kids? How do you help them navigate that?
I haven't I have found with my kids, it's best to just be very honest, speak frankly, not insensitively or coldly, but just tell them the facts of what has happened and then give them the space to have the feelings that they need to have.
Mm,
Um, I've been in situations where I had really, really big feelings, especially as a child, and it was really hard for the adults in the room to handle those feelings. And so they would kind of be like, okay, I can't handle this, probably because when they were children, they had big feelings and the adults couldn't handle it. So for me, I think just being there and listening to them and allowing them to go through that grief process is so important. Um, Rather than having like an answer for them, because we don't have an answer for that. That is part of life. Loss is part of life, and grief is part of life. And so I think it's actually a very valuable lesson to allow your kids to know that it's okay to experience grief and to allow them those moments of sadness. And it's pretty surprising, like they're pretty resilient, like they will get over things faster than we will,
yeah.
in a lot of cases. But yeah, I just try to be really honest, and if the tears happen, then that's just part of it, and just kind of
Mm.
hold space for them.
I love that, holding space for their big emotions. I think
Yeah.
something that every single one of us could really benefit from mastering that art of
Yeah.
holding space for our kids' big emotions. That's really
Yeah, and it's not easy, like, I mean, I have a hard time with my own emotions, much less theirs. It's our instinct to wanna fix it. It's like you can't fix it when something dies, you can't fix it, you can't bring them back.
right. And
Um,
learning about grief and processing, these big ideas, learning those hard lessons about life and death and dying and grief and all of that. That is one aspect of the learning that I think our kids do as we're taking care of chickens. But another thing that I tell homeschool families too is that there are so many other really positive and happy and wonderful things that our children can learn from having and raising our backyard chickens. And I would love to know, what would you say to a parent who's considering raising backyard chickens, how can raising chickens help you and help your children learn maybe some of the core school things, like, English or science, math? How would you see raising chickens fitting in with learning naturally in a homeschool setting?
Well, there's like so many ways that you can use the chicken yard, the chicken coop, the chickens themselves in lessons when it comes, to math, to science, all of that stuff. One thing that I think is so valuable, and I wish I would have done this because I do have my own homes. I'm not a homeschooler now, but I do have a homeschooling experience in my past with my oldest. And what I wish I would have done is when things got tough and you found yourself kind of not getting anywhere, not moving ahead. And with my oldest son, like honestly, he's a lot like me. And so,
Funny how that happens, right?
yeah, I would be like, oh my gosh, he can't learn from me. Like, I can't teach him and he can't learn from me. Like, that's how I would feel. We would get to these places where it's just like, we're not getting anywhere and we're just kind of bumping heads. And this doesn't feel good. It's not good for our relationship.
Mm,
Go outside. G- Stop, go outside, reset, connect with nature, whether it be with the chickens or the garden or just be outside. That is huge for any homeschooling or just parenting,
yeah,
just regular old parenting. If you can stop and say, okay, this isn't working. Let's go outside
get some
and
fresh air,
yeah, get some fresh air. There
change your.
really is something about that um that can get that energy moving again.
Mhm.
So that is my number one. Like, if you don't use chicken keeping as like, as part of like your curriculum or whatever, use it to get through the day, use it to like move from one moment to another when things get tough.
Mhm.
Um, and then obviously your kids are going to learn, uh, how to kind of reset. That's such a valuable lesson. And then
Mhm.
also the responsibility that comes with it, just taking care of another, uh, you know, animals is
Yeah,
huge in teaching responsibility. But
yeah.
yeah, I mean, gosh, even like little itty bitty tiny kids, you can start to teach math to them. Like, okay, like how many eggs did we get today?
Yeah, yep, and it
How many
all
eggs did we
counts.
break? Yeah. Yes.
Hopefully not that. I'm like, never wanna break them. They're like gold
Like
for us.
gold. Yeah.
And they literally are gold. If you have never seen a fresh egg before, I think that was one of the things that really surprised me too, is that the eggs from the grocery store, the yolks are like yellow, but our fresh eggs, they are literally gold. Like
Yeah.
the yolks are gold. It's something totally different. Actually, now my kids are so used to seeing it that if I crack two eggs in a bowl, like they're like, and it's one is yellow, they're like, wait, mom, that's a store egg. That's not one of our eggs. And they know, like they really do learn as you go through your life and as you learn how to care for chickens and how to have, raising chickens be a part of your normal daily everyday life and as a part of your family and your family's experience. They really do. They learn so much from math, as Delia mentioned, to learning about science. And then of course they're reading. My kids love to like read about the different breeds while we were trying to figure out, what breeds we wanted. And there's so many opportunities to incorporate learning naturally into raising and caring and keeping chickens. um,
Yeah, and it's funny because the way that the reason I started doing the homeschooling podcast circuit is because I realized, I have an online course. It's called Backyard Chickens 101, a chicken course for everyone. And homeschooling families started taking the course and incorporating it into their curriculum. And so I started getting messages like, "Oh, we're doing this as part of our homeschool program." I'm like,
I love
"Oh,
that.
okay." And so then I thought, "Okay, well, if this community is using this, I'm going to start talking to this community." And so
Yeah.
that's why I started doing all these podcasts And that has been really lovely. Of course, you don't have to buy the course. I've got tons of YouTube videos, but the thing that people like about the course is that it is structured. So I think it's easier to kind of like incorporate, like if you're actually going to use it as part of your curriculum, you can be like, okay, we're going to do this part of the course today and tomorrow. And then there's a certificate you get at the end, and there's like quizzes that you take and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm just so delighted to see families using chicken keeping just to learn about life, to learn about caring for chickens, and to also just be healthier in their families and their communities. That
Absolutely.
that makes my heart happy.
That's awesome. Well, Dalia, thank you so much for sharing all of this. And if you are interested in Dalia's YouTube channel, which, as she mentioned, has hundreds, literally hundreds of free resources at anything that you could possibly want to know about chickens, Dalia has it on her YouTube channel. I will share that in the description of this video or of this podcast. I don't know if you're watching us on YouTube or listening to the podcast. It will be in the description somewhere. And then I will also make sure that I include the links for her course and for her book that has just released. I am so excited that you have published that and that you have created this course, because you're right. Yes, free videos are so helpful, but sometimes it really does make a difference when you can have like an order and a structure to your learning. And I know a lot of families and a lot of children really thrive from having that additional structure and having all the stuff in one place where it's organized nicely and you can kind of, there's a flow to the learning
Yeah.
that you're doing. So thank you so much for investing your time and your effort and your energy into not only learning this content for yourself, but sharing your knowledge and your egg expertise with the world.
The
um,
puns are never ending.
Never ending. No, but truly, Dalia, it has been such a blessing and an honor to have you as a guest on my podcast today. I wish you all the best success in wherever you go in the future. And I hope and pray that God will open many doors for you to continue to share your passion with others, because truly your passion is changing and transforming lives for generations. My family is just one family that you have completely transformed us with your work and opened up a whole new world for us to be able to learn this new skill and to be able to pass the skill on to my future generations. So thank you so much for being bold and brave and using your skills to share your knowledge and your experience with us. We're so eternally grateful for you. And I hope that those of you who are listening, that you will start watching Dalia's YouTube videos, start to just inform yourself, begin by learning about this world of chicken keeping. And I encourage you this spring, it is springtime. Now is the perfect time. Go to a Tractor Supply near you, go to a local farm near you, go somewhere. Find a local backyard chicken farmer near you. They might have some eggs you can incubate in your house. But I encourage you, just take the plunge, dive in this spring, get some chickens for your backyard, experience the joy that is really getting connected to your food and getting connected to your ancestors and your roots, as Dalia mentioned. And yeah, so thank you guys so much for listening to this episode. Dalia, any closing thoughts or any last words of advice that you would have for our listeners?
Just keep on chicken on. Keep Had to end with a pun.
Yes, of course. Yes, your puns are excellent. Awesome. All right. Well, thank you, Dalia, and thank you to those of you listening. We will see you for our next episode next week. And I hope that you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for the difference that you all make in helping us to create a more peaceful world, beginning in our own hearts and homes. Have a wonderful day. Join us next Tuesday on the Peaceful World Schooling Podcast. I'm your host, Angela Harders. And if you enjoyed today's episode, click subscribe and be sure to hit the bell so you will not miss out on a single episode.